I would like to welcome the authors Elizabeth Bear and Scott Lynch. Welcome to Copenhagen, and thank you for doing this interview with us.
We're thrilled to be here.
We're really happy to be here.
That's good. I want to talk to you about an issue that's been coming up in the community. In recent years, there's been a lot of problems with sexism and racism in the science fiction and fantasy community. A group of prominent men in the industry decided to voice their opinions about women, female writers, female editors. There was a female author who was called the Savage. There was a author who was harassed at a industry party and was subjected to basically slut shaming afterwards because she posted pictures of herself on her website. In this day and age, how is this even occurring? I mean, in the industry, I mean, it should be the epitome of diversity. I mean, it's aliens, unicorns, sorcerers, magical objects. Why are women being treated like this?
It's a difficult question, and part of it is there's a complicated series of things that are going on in the industry right now with regard to women, people of color, gay people, trans people, those of us who are sort of lumped into the category of minorities. One of the things that's going on is that suddenly there are a whole lot of us. I've taken to referring to the current burst of diversity among the writers and readers of genre as the rainbow generation of science fiction and fantasy. I think it's Aliette de Bodard or Amal El-Motar who coined the term. It wasn't chromatic, was it? It was prismatic. I'm a D&D geek. I can tell the difference between chromatic and prismatic.
The difference between a chromatic female author and a prismatic female author
is very important. Yes. Only the chromatic has 5 heads. I'm sorry, that was terrible.
We've gone in a very nerdy direction very fast.
Shocking that we might be nerdy.
The first thing is that we should talk about the prominent author.
Quote, prominent author.
I'm sorry. The guy who called N.K. Jemisin a savage is a well-known troll and a moron who thinks he's a genius. He's been an idiot in public for at least 15 years now, and he thrives on this attention. It's all he has going for him. His career has been absolutely second-rate. Actually, no, that's being too kind to it. His career has been third-rate. Nobody wants his stuff. He has decided the explanation for this is that there's a vast conspiracy of anyone who isn't a white male, rather than the evident fact that his work sucks. And I've tangled with this guy on a couple of occasions. He's an idiot, but he thinks he's a super genius. He's Wile E. fucking Coyote. Pardon my French.
I am very much of the agreement that the individual who in question is a real crank. And
crank is a good word for it.
This is how he gets attention.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not to say that racism and sexism and homophobia are not issues. There are not both systematic, hierarchical issues, within society as a whole, and science fiction and fantasy fandom as a subset, and also that there aren't certain individuals who are just basically horrible human beings, and the thing that's important to me, the thing that I tell myself is that, first of all, the best way we can combat this kind of behavior is through the diversity of the people we represent in our books and in our publishing lists if we happen to be editors, whose voices we promote when we get on Twitter, whose viewpoints we put forward. And I make a point of promoting the viewpoints of people like Nora Jemisin and Aliette de Bodard and Nnedi Okorafor, and Saladin Ahmed, who I think have a lot of really good things to say and who have interesting stories to tell, and who have bring a diversity of background and interest to the genre that we haven't had before, and that's very important, and that enriches my life as a reader. So I think there is very easy positive action that can be taken to deal with the people who are problematic. And one of the easiest things that any reader can do is to read widely, and hear what people actually have to say for themselves. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be reading the work of people who are racist or sexist or homophobic, because I don't think you should be avoiding reading anyone's work unless it personally makes you uncomfortable or you don't want to. I think that wisdom comes from breadth of experience, and one of the ways we increase our own experience is by reading other people's experience, people who are not just like us.
I guess I feel very safe saying that the percentage of people in the field who are actively vile and useless on these subjects is actually really, really vanishingly small. But they make a disproportionate amount of noise for their size within the industry and the fanish demographics. And what you have is you also have just the inevitable social inertia of essentially people who've never had to think about this stuff, and who find being asked in any measure to think about it, to ponder whether they're being thoughtless, to be somehow offensive to them. It can be a little startling being asked to think outside your comfort zone. Then you realize that it's really not that difficult. You are not being asked to surrender anything. You're just being asked to have respect for your fellow human beings. Treating other human beings with dignity. I mean, this should be the baseline of how we interact. This should be the simplest assumption of our time together. And yet the mere act of treating other people decently is
radical.
Is treated as though it is somehow radical when it should not be. It's not painful. You don't lose anything. Nothing is being taken from anybody by the simple fact of trying to be less of an asshole. This I guess the great generational struggle. To wake up and realize that not everyone shares the same comfort zone, and that it doesn't actually have to hurt to embrace this notion.
Thank you. There's a different side to this as well. It seems like I've read a lot of things on the internet, like blogs and stuff like that. Almost like people find it inconceivable that men can actually write strong, independent female characters. And I know you've had an encounter with a reader a couple of years ago. How do you write these women? I mean,
how do you write these alien creatures?
Exactly, that people find so impossible.
Quote. I'll quote George R. Martin.
How do you write strong women?
How do we write strong women? Well, okay. You write a human being who happens to be a woman, and oh shit, now I'm going to get killed. I've told the secret. You operate under you operate under the assumption that women are actual people, and that means they have the right and the responsibility to be involved in every aspect of your storytelling. That means they get to be strong, they get to be weak, they get to be heroes, they get to be villains, they get to be complex, they get to be mercurial, they get to have moods, they get to have weaknesses. There's this tolerance for shifty, malleable, frustrating, cantankerous masculine characters in popular fiction. These are treated as interesting portraits of humanity, but if you do the same thing with a female character, you get all kinds of backlash, because how dare we express the notion that a female might be as complex and worthwhile as a man. It's a problem of punching through cultural inertia. It's a problem of beating up on incredibly outdated standards. That are still just, how do we get past things that are so taken for granted? I mean,
Machetes.
Machetes are a good way of yeah, machetes, sociological and physical.
I was going to say, if you're going to claim that's a metaphor, I actually mean machetes.
And what I've had to deal with, I guess, is readers who find it uncomfortable. They find it, that it somehow insults them or makes them feel weird that, oh my God, women are allowed to, be heroes and kick ass and do things and have feelings and be complex in fiction that they believe is still their personal fantasy land.
And find male characters irritating.
Yes.
How dare
So that
you bring
these are the
real
idiot
women
letters that I've dealt with,
into
and really, it's
Girl
only
Land.
been a couple. That, I mean, the volume of mail I get from idiots is minuscule compared to the volume of mail that many other authors get. I guess I'm just fortunate enough to be my books have done well enough that a lot of people have read them. You're going to get some letters from cranks when this happens.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that would be your answer because you mentioned George R. R. Martin. Joss Whedon was asked several times how he wrote such strong female characters, and his answer was, because you're still asking that question.
And the interesting thing is the other side is, when is the last time that can anyone in this room remember a time when a female writer was asked, how do you write such realistic male portraits?
Well, that's because either we're told that we can't, and no man that we ever write will ever be realistic, or because it's not like the entire culture is saturated with men's depictions of men's, and we might, get an idea of what you're like, even if we're not in the locker room with you.
Either the question isn't asked, or a tall
I'm
guy comes
finished.
along and speaks over you. Oops, did you see what I did there? Sorry, please continue. I thought that was funny.
Miss Andre.
I was providing a positive example of what we're discussing. I thought it was funny.
So was me choking you, except for the domestic violence aspect of it, which was slightly problematic.
Help, I'm being repressed.
We'll get to that later. Now I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. So
You were talking about how awesome my books were.
Your books are
Oh,
awesome.
that was later.
We're either told that we can't, or there's that whole thing where the culture is saturated with male depictions of men, and most women have known a few men, and we are forced to learn to get along with them. And a man can pretty much get through his life and be successful and never have to really deal with women as human beings unless he finds himself in the situation of having a female boss. Women don't have that privilege. There's an axiom that I think comes from the civil rights movement, that it's always easier to emulate somebody who is above you in the social hierarchy because you have to notice them. And men are above women in the social hierarchy, so we have to be able to emulate them.
And it's just assumed.
Over to you, Bob.
It's just assumed that if you are writing, you should be able to create a rich human portrait. That means by default a man. You don't get any credit for writing men because everybody knows that we're
Right.
human beings.
Well, yeah, books about men are books about people, and books about women are books about women.
Or gender issues.
Yes.
Even if your book is chock full of male characters doing masculine stuff, it will still get pegged as a woman's issue book or put in the woman's section, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just one of those things where you can't seem to fucking win.
Machetes.
Again, apologies for my French.
That's not French.
Close. Apologies for my harsh Saxon consonants.
You should probably come back with another question soon.
All right.
Oh, look, an interviewer.
We can do this all
Right.
day.
All right, moving in different directions. Bear, you are one of the best science fiction, fantasy, horror writers in the world. How do you?
Pardon.
I'm not sure I agree with. Oh wait, I do.
Oh, wait, I'll get to you afterwards. How do you move between the genres? I mean, do you have to be in a certain frame of mind? Is there a genre you prefer?
This is what I grew up reading. I grew up in a family with 4 adult science fiction readers, because both my mother and my father and both of my grandfathers were science fiction fans. And I sort of I had the run of all of their libraries, so I was exposed to a lot of different types of science fiction and fantasy. Everything from Asimov to Selazny to Joe Clayton to Octavia Butler to Samuel Delaney, who's my mom's favorite writer, to Joanna Russ, and then back around to Heinlein, just the Jack Vance, Robert Howard, and I don't I think of them as being as the various aspects of speculative fiction not being all that different. They're all about playing what if games with the world. They're all about the idea of, well, if I change this, what happens? If I change this, what happens? And I don't think, while I am a huge fan of certain subgenres, I love political fantasy a lot. I love really hard, crunchy science fiction, the kind that Peter Watts writes. I love sociological science fiction. I love sort of mythic fantasy in the Peter Beagle mold. So those are, I do have the things that I am passionate about reading that are just bulletproof kinks for me as a reader. But as a writer, I have a short attention span, actually. And so I have a hard time doing the same thing twice. I would probably be more commercially successful at this point if I could manage to if I could have kept writing Jenny Casey novels for the past 10 years. But I couldn't stand to ruin her life again. So.
Scott, you are one of our bestsellers at the shop. What attracted you to the fantasy genre?
Interesting. Originally, I was actually kind of a science fiction snob. I didn't read a lot of fantasy growing up. I didn't, I watched fantasy movies. I was, there were fantasy role-playing games and so on and so forth. I was aware of fantasy. But during my seriously developmental reading years, I started with, Doctor Who novels and Doctor Who New Adventures, and moved from there to, Asimov and Haldeman and David Brin and William Gibson. The cyberpunk writers were a huge influence on me when I was a teenager. Margaret Atwood, for various reasons, was also my big teenage obsession. And for several years, I just didn't read any fantasy. And I guess I had sort of unconsciously become a little snobby about it. And a guy in my high school class, completely at random, threw a copy of Ray Feist's Magician at me one day, and basically forced me to read it. I mean, he didn't bend my arm or anything, but he just wouldn't take no for an answer. And reluctantly, I started reading it, and maybe 2 days later, I was at Barnes & Noble buying the next 4 books in the series. So Ray Feist is kind of my formative fantasy influence, and from there I moved into Moorcock and Fritz Leiber and everything, and sort of shifted from planning to be a science fiction writer to planning to be a fantasy writer. I suppose it's much as Bear said, it's what we grew up with, it's what we swam in, it's what we always wanted to be, it's everything we love. I guess I've found as I've grown up, the thing that's attractive about fantasy and science fiction in general is that these we write about ostensibly fantastical things. We write about dragons and swords and magic and places that never were and never will be, but we're really writing about us. We're writing about our problems. We're writing about our peoples, our hopes, our dreams, and our past. I forget who to attribute the quote to, but someone once said that history is the trade secret of science fiction. We are not escaping from any human reality. We are engaging with it through allegory and subtext. It is exactly the same as science fiction. We add some of this and take out some of that, and add some of this and explore the consequences. It's just too much fun to give up.
That's a good way to put
it. There is that. What the hell else are we going to do? Are we crazy? You get to write books for a living? Yes, we'll do that.
It beats answering telephones.
Yes, it does. It really does.
It beats answering telephones.
I was chopping salads when I sold my first novel. I'd rather be writing novels. Thank you very much.
Both of you, do you remember the exact moment when you found out you wanted to be a writer?
You first.
I was probably 4 or 5. I always knew I wanted to be a cartoonist, and I can't remember when I can't remember not being able to read. I must have learned to read when I was about 3. I mean, it predates my memories of me existing, and I could definitely read at a fairly advanced level at the age of 5. So I guess by about 6 or so, I would have figured out that I could make books. Because then in first grade, I was making Transformers books. On paper, I was drawing all the Transformers. I was a child of the early 80s. And I would take them into the library at school and try to trade them for real books.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
They wouldn't take them. I did the Scholastic book fairs too. I would try to offer a 1-for-1 trade, and they're like, no. We take money, not fake books.
Oh.
So I got the full experience. I wanted to be an author, and I discovered that nobody wanted what I was offering,
And
my
learned
spirit
about
was
rejection.
crushed. Yes, I learned about rejection at a very early age.
I had a similar experience. I was also a very early reader and a very voracious reader. And my big treat every week, if I'd been good at school, was that on payday my mom would take me to the bookstore. The Paperback Trader in East Hartford, Connecticut, sadly no longer there, which had an extensive children's mystery and science fiction section and not much else. Once I had read all the children's books, I started in on the science fiction. But the thing was that at some point the penny dropped for me that when you go to a bookstore and get a book, that book comes from somewhere. It's like when you go to the grocery store and you buy food, somebody farmed or fished or somehow produced or that food. When you go to a bookstore and get a book, somebody wrote that book. Somebody then published it. And I was like, I want to make books. I want to tell people stories. And I was really very bad at it. I started off making books, again, stapled, lined paper, and except my stories were very paleontologically unlikely tales of dinosaurs and occasionally UFOs. And then I wrote some Black Stallion fanfic, the Walter Farley books, and all sorts of other things. But sadly, none of that survives. So... And I kept trying to talk myself into other jobs where I might actually be able to make a living, but it never really worked out. So here I am, telling stories.
Oh, we're happy about that.
In Denmark.
All right, last question. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now?
Right now, I'm working on book 4 in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which is called The Thorn of Emberlane.
I think you should start trolling people when they ask this question.
Right now, I'm working on book 6, which is called The Fall of Atlantis.
We're just going to skip straight to book 6. Book 4 wasn't working out.
Well, yeah. It's like what was Graham Chapman's autobiography was called The Autobiography of a Liar, Volume 6.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some short stories that I owe, and a novella that I owe to Subterranean Press called The Mad Baron's Mechanical Attic.
I'm actually working on the next Locke Lamora book because Scott's been writing Star Wars fan fiction.
So much Star Wars fan fiction.
You heard it here first. I just handed in the copy-edited manuscript for a book called Karen Memory, which is a Wild West steampunk adventure novel about a young woman who is a saloon girl, which is a euphemism for prostitute. My editor describes this as the only book about a prostitute she's ever read with no sex in it. It's her day job.
There's sex all over the
There's
place.
sex
It's the
all over-
hottest
so much
book
sex.
you will ever read.
No, there's adventure. There's
This is what we call the inside. This is the afterword. The
Oh.
foreword and the back cover say sex.
Sex,
Then they
sex,
buy
sex.
the
There's
book, and then they find out what your editor said.
there's gunplay and fights through streets and running across rooftops and
Running across rooftop sex. Gunplay sex.
gunplay sex. Anyway,
that can be my blurb.
it was originally conceived as a YA novel, but I couldn't sell it that way. So, but it's I think it's a lot of fun. And now I am working on with Sarah Monette, the third in our trilogy, the much delayed third in our trilogy of Nordic wolf books. And when that's done, More fantasy, more science fiction.
Thundercats fanfic.
Thundercats fanfic.
We're working on Thundercats fanfic together.
Yeah.
That's a real story I just made up.
All right. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy your stay here in Copenhagen.
So far, so good.